Alexander III of Macedon, better known as Alexander the Great, is one of the most enticing and popular historical figures. His brief but intense life, the transcendence of all of his conquests and victories, and the radical changes he brought about in the world in which he lived, has led to the publication of many works in recent centuries on everything related to his life and work. Alexander the Great was born in Pella, a city located in the political center of Macedonia, in the summer of 356 BC. He was the son of Olympias and King Philip II. Of all of Alexander's childhood teachers and instructors, none is as famous or as important as Aristotle, who was well versed in history, literature, geography, mathematics, ethics, politics, philosophy, and medicine. Alongside this comprehensive education, Alexander's childhood was balanced with hard physical training. In 336 BC, as a result of a conspiracy, Alexander's father was murdered. At just 20 years old, Alexander, who had already shown some military maturity, knew he had to move fast if he wanted to secure succession on the throne. First, he seized the palace of Egas, pronouncing himself king. Backed by Antipatro, one of his father's most senior generals, he received the oath of allegiance from the nobility and representatives of the army. Once he had avenged his father's death, he secured his own future by taking out his potential rivals. Thus, Alexander had his half-brother Carano and his cousin Amintas IV executed. In addition, he sent a man he fully trusted, Hecateo of Cardia, to Asia to finish off Attalo, who was the commander-in-chief of the Macedonian army in that region. Meanwhile, his mother, the ruthless Olympias, had Philip's last wife, the niece of Attalo, Cleopatra Eurydice, and also his young daughter, Europa, murdered. With the throne assured, the Macedonian turned to his neighbors. In a rapid campaign of just a few weeks, almost all of Greece bent the knee and accepted Alexander as its new leader in the coming war against the Persian Empire. Before returning home, Alexander the Great visited the Oracle of Delphi to perform something that would be repeated many times in his coming campaigns, to seek the support of the local gods in order to justify his conquests. Having consolidated his power in Macedonia and Greece, during the spring of 334 BC, Alexander marched to Asia to lead the troops. A colossal army of 37,000 troops, consisting of 12,000 soldiers from the Macedonian phalanx, 3,000 of the royal guard, the Hypaspists, 1,800 soldiers from the elite cavalry, the Hetairoi, and 9,000 infantry and cavalry soldiers provided by their Greek allies, as well as special light infantry units from Illyria and Thrace. Not only did he have a powerful land army, but when the time came, he would also have a powerful fleet of about 200 ships. Alexander's first great victory against the Persians took place on the river Beja in 334 BC. He then marched along the southern coast of Turkey, conquering cities such as Sardes, Ephesus, Miletus, and Halicarnassus. In practice, this would mean that in just over a year, the Macedonian conqueror would have most of the Anatolian peninsula under his thumb. The Persian king, Darius III, worried that he could not stop Alexander's progress. He assumed command, seeking a victory in a ground battle that ended up being decisive. However, in 333 BC, he suffered a humiliating defeat at the Battle of Issus. Then, Alexander decided to go down the Syro-Palestine Strip before entering the heart of the Persian Empire, with the intention of depriving them of the naval bases they had in that area. In this way, Alexander the Great's conquests continued to spread throughout the Mediterranean coast, including Syria, Phoenicia, and Gaza. Alexander then stopped in Egypt to liberate its ancient civilization from the Persian yoke. After passing through Pelusium or Memphis, Alexander was proclaimed pharaoh. Years later, with the rise to power of his general, Ptolemy, a new dynasty of Macedonian origin would rule the fate of Egypt for 3 centuries, the Ptolemaic dynasty. To win over his people, his priests, and even his gods, Alexander made a stop at the Suia Oasis to visit the Oracle of Ammon that proclaimed his divine origin. The Macedonian tried not to impose too much change in Egypt and did not alter its provincial divisions nor its traditions. Nothing would be as it had before though. In the Nile Delta, off the coast, he founded Alexandria in 331 BC, a city named after himself. Conceived from its origin as the best showcase for the west of Egypt's richness and cultural and economic splendor, Alexandria soon became one of the most important cities not only in Egypt, but throughout the ancient world. According to sources, some 600,000 inhabitants lived there at the end of the Hellenistic period. That very same year, Alexander's conquests led him to Mesopotamia. Taking advantage of Alexander's stay in Egypt, the Persian king, Darius, had assembled a powerful army. But his overwhelming numerical superiority was of no use during the Battle of Gaugamela. Alexander emerged victorious thanks to his expertise as a strategist. The battle, which meant Macedonia's ultimate defeat, actually meant the end of the Persian Empire, since after this battle, all of the actions of Darius III would be of flight and defense. After this important success, Babylon and Susiana surrendered. In quick succession, Alexander took Pasargadae and Persepolis, the capital of the Persian Empire. Due to the unstoppable advance of the Macedonian conqueror, Darius III was killed by his satrap, Bessus, who then proclaimed himself king under the name of Artaxerxes. This was a great turning point in Alexander's conquests, as, with great intelligence, he adopted the title of King of Kings and decided to avenge Darius, undertaking the persecution of Bessus. The Macedonian conqueror significantly transformed his appearance and behavior to achieve the recognition of his new eastern subjects. To do this, he began to dress in the typical clothes of the Persian kings, give his friends purple garments embroidered in gold to wear in public, and saddled the horses with the typical harnesses from the area. He created 2 chancelleries, one European and one Eastern, dispatched with the royal seal of Darius III. He also surrounded himself with a rich entourage of local nobles who worshipped him, and even formed a harem with hundreds of women and eunuchs. In the following months, he subdued and occupied Hyrcania, Aria, Drangiana, Prophasia, and Aracusia, and reached the Kabul Valley, in what is now Afghanistan. Bessus would not escape for much longer, as he was caught by Alexander on his way through Sogdiana, the northernmost satrapy of the empire, where the now dry Aral Sea is located. After several years dedicated to the construction and fortification of cities, the pacification of all that is now the area of Iran, and the fight against internal rebellions in his own army for the growing despotism of his reign, Alexander pushed on into India in 327 BC. Unlike the Persian Empire, India at that time lacked centralized power and was divided amongst many peoples and kingdoms, no doubt an exciting challenge for Alexander. He did not stop. He penetrated into the Indo Valley, crossed the Jhelum and the Beas rivers, defeated local kings, and claimed lands where no other Western person had ever been before. However, the larger and more unmanageable the Alexandrian Empire became, the more dissatisfaction there was within his army. This was understandable. They had been away from home for years, although many had formed families in the conquered areas, as Alexander favored mixed races. Eventually, the Macedonian had no choice but to begin his return to the west, conquering many more places along the way. By 324 BC, Alexander was back in Persepolis, and in 323 BC, he had settled in Babylon, a city where he began numerous works to fill the city with majestic new monuments that illustrated his greatness, engraving his name in stone for all eternity. In that same city, on the night of June 10th, 323 BC, he died of an unknown disease at the age of 32. Other hypotheses talk of poisoning. The death of Alexander the Great had such an impact that it is often taken as fact that the history of ancient Greece begins with the Hellenistic period. Gone were great projects such as conquering Arabia, the land of myrrh and incense, a key place in trade between the East and the Mediterranean. The civilizing project dreamed of by the Macedonian had vanished before it was realized. Ambitious, passionate and calculating, generous and yet cruel, the invincible Alexander, whom posterity would know as the Great, had ridden thousands of miles on the back of his horse, Bucephalus, with the idea of forming a gigantic empire that generated a universal character. An empire that, by the way, would end up being one of the shortest in history, and that would be divided up amongst his generals.